The King's Indian is one of the most popular chess openings for a reason. Getting the setup is easy. What's hard is knowing what to do next. So in this video, I want to show you 10 common patterns that will make it easy for you to play the King's Indian and in general will improve your positional understanding. And right away, you can see one thing that will help you play more like a master versus a beginner. Right here, I pulled off an online database of blitz games, and you can see that the most played move by white here is pawn to e5 among amateur players. Pawn to f4 is also fairly common. But now, let me switch it over to masters games. Now, just look at the top choice. First of all, literally nobody plays pawn to e5, even though that move was the most popular among beginners. Now, what is the difference? Strong players know that in an opening, you gotta develop your pieces. You should not play too many pawn moves. Now, I know, it looks tempting for white to push this pawn forward, attack the knight, and force it all the way back. And yes, they say a knight in the ream is dim, but you can always increase the brightness of your screen. Not really a problem, right? But more seriously, now white feels that black is going to attack the center, therefore they play f4, and for a second, this position looks really good for white, and that's why beginner players really love in different openings, making a lot of pawn moves and building nice pawn structures. But the downside is that simultaneously ignores development and gives your opponent a chance to attack these overextending positions and those advanced pawns. Because the downside of advanced pawns is that they're very close to the black position, making it very convenient for black to attack them. And black now goes pawn to d6, and now the pawn is already attacked twice, and for white it's already an issue. If white captures, that just allows this dim knight to come back into play. If white tries to just protect him, black keeps attacking, now the knight is pinned, therefore this pawn is still attacked. If white keeps trying to preserve the center, the knight to d7, and now this whole construction falls apart. By the way, there was one very interesting example when somebody tried playing this variation against Fischer. Big mistake. Fischer traded off central pawn, started attacking that white's exposed king, and now he finishes it off with the rook sacrifice, followed by the queen sacrifice, and then this absolutely ridiculous checkmate. Point number 2 is that the King's Indian works really well against the London system, and here is why. As white builds their usual setup, we now can see a big difference. In the classical Queen's Gambit setup, this bishop on f4 is really active along this diagonal, plus this square on e5 is in firm white's control, and white can also land his knight there in the middle game. Now compare this to the King's Indian, where you put your pawn not to d5 but to d6. Now this bishop on f4 has no future, it has nowhere to go from here, right? Your pawn changes, blockades it. Moreover, you have also an aggressive plan that you're going to execute within just a couple moves, as white keeps their usual moves, and they pretty much always play that, which is a great advantage for you because London players usually just build their setup. And now you can strike in the center with pawn to e5, and you already seize the initiative, and white is already a little bit of in trouble because you're attacking the bishop. Most of the time they will capture on e5. If not, no problem, you can support this pawn further, queen e7, threatening to push this pawn forward with a double attack to the bishop and knight, and again white is already experiencing some issues and you already begin attacking. Now most of the time though, they're going to play the most obvious move, capturing the pawn on e5, because they calculated that they have two attackers to this pawn on e5, a bishop and a knight, while you only have one defender. But what they're missing here is that besides attacking this bishop on f4, this also opened up this discovered attack of the bishop on d3, and thanks to that, you're actually just winning a piece after this mass exchange on e5. You just grab this bishop on d3, and your queen is also really well placed there, preventing white from castling, on top of you having an extra piece. When both sides follow the main line, it often leads to a position like that, where your queenside knight cannot be developed to its natural square because of the white pawn right there. But then you have an even better and more advanced square on c5, which is even better for your knight, and it's pretty easy to land your knight right there. But there's a problem. If you try doing so, your opponent can always stop this by playing pawn to b4 and controlling this square himself. Which brings us to the point number 3, secure your good knight. You need to push your pawn forward to a5, preventing white from ever playing this move, and after that, it's very easy to reroute your knight there, either this way or this way. And then your knight stands on this absolutely excellent square. Very hard for white to ever get rid of it. If white tries to prepare this b4 advancement in the future, you still land your knight on c5. It also attacks this pawn on e4. by the way. And if white protects it somehow, then you have another great move that absolutely secures this great position of the knight on c5. It's the move pawn to a4. Now there is no way on earth white can ever play this move pawn to b4, and if some of your less experienced opponents play this move, you'll get to enjoy one of our favorite chess snacks, an en croissant capture. Next up, don't underestimate the dragon bishop's pressure on white's center. This is something that your opponents will often not take into account until it's too late, because right now it does not seem like an issue. White center is perfectly well protected, but what they forget is this is a long-term thing. And pretty often they'll play something like this, which is a good looking move, but is already an inaccuracy. And why am I calling this a dragon? Well, it's because there is also a dragon variation of the Sicilian defense where they use a similar idea, this sniper bishop standing right here and putting long-term pressure onto white's position, especially white's center. And here we've got the same setup. Now, black sees an opportunity to start putting pressure. First off, they play bishop g4. An idea is to eliminate this knight from f3, because right now this is the main defender of this pawn. Let's say white tries to get rid of the pin, then you trade on f3 and you play knight to c6. Now white already feels some annoyance about this because the pawn is attacked. If the pawn comes forward, your knight can keep jumping forward, attacking everything around. If white tries defending, now you can remove this knight to open up a diagonal for your bishop. You move it right here. Now the pawn is attacked once again. Again, if it comes forward, your knight can always go here or here and attack everything around. That's good for you. And if white tries maintaining the center and let's say defend the pawn that way, then the common attack would be pawn to e5. That would be a nice move for black to play. But in the current position, there is an even more brutal way. It is to land your knight on e5. And white is like, wait a second, I can just take this knight. But this brotherhood saves knights. You've got one more knight, and now this is a double attack. The queen has to move somewhere. Then you capture this knight on d3, the bishop, with a check. The king goes somewhere. You capture this pawn on b2, then maybe even this one on c4, and white is totally destroyed. By the way, if you want to spot tactics like this in your real games, not just in puzzles, I explain it step by step in my free masterclass. The link is down below. And here's another game played by Fischer. By the way, Fischer and Kasparov really loved playing the King's Indian. And here we're going to learn 3 ideas within just a very short fragment of this game. Here's the first one. In closed positions, you need to decide your plan. And it's a bit tricky because if you actually ask yourself, how can I checkmate the king? Like, there is no direct way at all in any near future, right? And also, it's hard to see anything that you can literally attack. Then what do you do? And the rule is, in close positions, you gotta attack where your central pawn chain points toward. So here's the idea. Where's your central pawn chain, by the way? Is it like this one or this one? We gotta look at the 2 central files, this one and this one. A lot of that, your central pawns are these 2, and they point toward the king side, right? These 2 pawns. Therefore, black's plan is to attack there. And that is why Fischer played knight to e8, giving path to this pawn to come forward and begin attacking. White tries doing the same thing. They're attacking on their side of the board, on the queen side. They're putting pressure here. Fischer protects the pawn on c5, rook b1. White is trying to make some counterattack on the queen side. And now Fischer plays pawn to f5, putting pressure down here. White plays... Oh, by the way, another question. What if white captures here on f5? How would you recapture? Actually, quite a tricky question, and it's, not super critical, I would say, but nevertheless, usually it's better to capture with a pawn to keep your pawn center. And it's tricky because it's actually quite appealing to capture with a pawn and hit the rook, stuff like that. But the downside is you give up your pawn center. And now, for example, this knight can land on e4 because there is no pawn on f5 that controls this square. And now white is doing perfectly fine, right? Versus when you recapture with a pawn, just look at this. Now you control all these squares, right, around the board. You really just press white. It's very hard for white's pieces to come forward at all. Like, you just took away all the squares. And plus you keep the mobility. Now these 2 pawns can easily keep coming forward if you want to, continue your attack. So that's a pretty nice idea. Now in the game, white didn't play this. The white player Korchnoi, also one of the strongest players in the world, he played pawn to f3, solidifying his pawn chain. And now another question for you. Would you take here or do nothing or push forward with pawn to f4? What do you think? Well, there's also a general rule of the Igor Nation. If you trade, be sure you're paid. Meaning here, you do not want to trade for no reason. You want to trade only if it gives you a good deal, so to say, right? If you're having some sort of an advantage as a result of this trade. And here, if you trade on e4, you get nothing. To the contrary, you actually help white to activate this knight and to put it to an excellent central square. And also, again, it just gives you nothing, because your plan here really is to keep pushing this pawn forward on f4. Now you gain more space, making it harder for the white pieces to move around, and you also set it up for your future pawn assault on the king side, and that will be your plan for the middle game. Just push the pawn forward, deliver an attack there, and ultimately checkmate white's king, and actually that's how Fischer won this game. Moving on to the next one, the dragon bishop often creates sudden tactical chances. We slightly touched this subject before, that the bishop puts pressure onto white's center, but this time I want to take it one step further. It actually creates a lot of tactical opportunities that are completely sudden for your opponent. Imagine that white simply castles here, which is actually the main line, and black can, for instance, trade on d4 and then play rook e8, hitting this pawn on e4. White defends it, you play knight to c6, and now already there is a little bit of a pressure, and if white is careless and plays any random move, let's say something like this, which might seem like a normal development move, but in this position it's actually a big blunder, because you trade on d4 and then you launch this boom tactics onto your unsuspecting opponent, because now this bishop opens up this discovered attack and white is destroyed. And you may be wondering, like, Igor, white doesn't have to cooperate, right? There are many ways for white to get rid of this. Well, it's not that simple, because you have your attacking ideas everywhere. Say white trades here on c6. Well, that's actually pretty nice for you. Now this pawn is closer to the center. White can no longer jump there with their knight forward. Plus you have the semi-open file for your rook, which will combine with the pressure of this bishop. And you see that it can easily get uncomfortable for white. Right, let's take this back. Most of the time they actually play bishop e3, which is a nice move, solidifies this knight on d4. But even here, you don't have to stop. There's here a line that even strong players got destroyed with. It's knight to h5. Initially, again, not too clear what you're trying to achieve with this. Maybe pawn to f5, who knows? Using the pressure of this rook. White plays queen d2, another super solid move. And then you trade on d4. White trades, thinking that you just want to trade off everything, but you play knight f4. This is another sudden move. White thinks, hey, wait a second, I can just take this knight, right? Wrong, because then he'll lose the bishop on d4. And yes, this does not lose the game for white, but actually this trade is really great for you, because now your bishop is just a monster. That full dragon, as we talked about before. Very good for you. And if white doesn't want to allow this trade, and let's say they capture it here on g7, then you unleash another tactics. You play queen g5, this time threatening checkmate. Queen takes g2, right? If white tries to stop that, now knight to h3, another unexpected tactical move. The king goes somewhere. Now they lose the queen on d2. Now this entire variation is so sudden and counterintuitive, and it seems like white just played all the correct moves but got destroyed so badly. They can't even take this knight because it's actually guarded by your bishop from c8, and white is just destroyed. There is also another common tactical pattern which works out in this Zamish variation, which can actually be quite dangerous if white plays it, because they have a very straightforward attacking plan on the king side. If you try playing your classical usual king's Indian defense moves, and white plays queen d2, and then you try to reroute your knight right here to this usual great square, they go bishop h6, and their plan is straightforward and brutal. They want to trade off this main defender of your king, then push these pawns forward and just checkmate you right there. What do you do there? Well, instead of panicking, there's a really nice tactical shot here. Knight takes e2. And that comes as a complete shocker, because this square obviously is very well protected by white, but that's not the point. The point is this move queen to h4, which comes with a double attack. And even your sleeping dragon on g7 is still dangerous. It is still a dragon. And now you've won a pawn. After the trade, you also get this really monstrous bishop on h6. You're going to play pawn to f5, kick this knight out, you're up a pawn, and you're having a strategically winning position. If the previous trick was not applicable to the game, then there is one more. There's actually a pretty cool idea. Sometimes in such positions, again in a similar Zamish type of structures, when white tries attacking you on the king side, they may wish to trade off right here, play queen to c2, putting up this battery, and maybe even play g4 in the future. They can castle king side, and that is a pretty straightforward plan of their attack on the king side, right? What do you do against this? There's a really nice positional sacrifice, pawn to e4. At first, this looks like just a blunder, looks like white is winning a pawn right there, but you're not going to recapture, play pawn to f4. And again, at first, it seems like counterintuitive. Why would you give up a pawn and weaken your king, seemingly? But there are a lot of great things that you achieve with this sacrifice. First off, again, let's not forget about this dragon bishop. It is just a monster. Now you have this entire long diagonal for your bishop. Also, If white castles there, your bishop will support your attack on the queen side as you open up files there. It's going to be dangerous for white. Secondly, just look at this bishop on d3. While it may look like a diamond, it is definitely not a gem, right? It's completely restricted, literally has no moves at all, all right? And lastly, you also have this excellent square on e5, which previously was occupied by your pawn, but not anymore. Now you land your knight right here, it's super active, ready to attack. This bishop from g7 is ready to go, and you also have a straightforward attacking plan on the queen side. You're going to open up the files there, use this knight, use the bishop, and just complete your attack. If you want to spot tactics and attacking moves like this in your real games, I explain the full thinking process in my free masterclass. The link is down below. And if you want to know my favorite aggressive opening for white, I break it down right here.